Well, welcome to Ninerology. It is December 26th, and you are in for a very special episode here on Ninerology because today, December 26th, is officially our 1 year as being a YouTube channel slash creating videos and all things just from a perspective of a Niner faithful. I love the 49ers. In fact, I'm not a analyst. I'm not a commentator. I am not any kind of media head. I'm not a press person, anything like that. I'm just a fan that loves talking 49er football. And at the 1 year mark, again, December 26th, this is when we started Ninerology. Uh, I remember it because it's when they got blown out against the Ravens, and a game that we thought was going to be a Super Bowl preview last year, and it ended up being not being that. But it's been a year, over 650 subscribers. So thank you for all those that tune in each week and that help support the channel. You can always support the channel by liking and subscribing. But today we wanted to talk about something different, something that the 49ers really need to address in the offseason. And it's a lot about going back to your roots. What's your DNA? 49ers, what's been kind of that key cog that's identified you throughout the years? And it comes back to one word for me, and that's trenches, specifically the defensive line. Let's talk about some of the 49ers greats. One of my favorites, Bryant Young, Leo Nomaleni. It's a tough last name to say. You got Fred Dean, you have Dana Stubblefield, you have Cedric Hardman, you have Michael Carter, you have Charlie Kruger, Ed Hanks, Tommy Hart. Probably my favorite defensive lineman of all time is probably the Cowboy Justin Smith. Then you have Aldon Smith, who was kind of that hybrid defensive end outside linebacker when they ran a 3-4, and what he could have been. Bryant Young, Charles Haley. Then you go and fast forward to when the 49ers were in the Super Bowl with Jim Harbaugh. They had D Ford, DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead. You had Nick Bosa in his rookie year. Then you go back. That was with Kyle Shanahan. You go back to Jim Harbaugh and his Super Bowl appearance. Who did they have? They had Ray McDonald, Isaac Sopuaga. You had the Cowboy Justin Smith. You had Aldon Smith. And so I think the 49ers, the key for the 49ers this offseason is getting back to that DNA. And that DNA is all about the defensive line. Getting that defensive line to create consistent pressure week in and week out. One of the things the 49ers still do is they carry about 9 defensive linemen on game day, where most teams carry between 7 and 8. The 49ers want to try to stay as fresh as possible. And you can have a bunch of guys, but if you don't have somebody opposite of Nick Bosa, you can have other guys be as fresh as possible, but no other team's going to need to double team both sides of the ball. They'll just say, we'll go ahead and chip and double team Nick Bosa because the other side, regardless of their fresh, they don't have kind of that superior pass rusher. The 49ers have tried addressing it multiple times, and you have guys like Leonard Floyd this year, who's been okay, not great. You tried to re-sign Chase Young, who was a teammate of Nick Bosa at Ohio State. That didn't really pan out. And then there's been a few players here and there that have kind of shown a little bit, but kind of played out of their contract. And so the 49ers, they really need to address their defensive line. And I think it's very clear. It's something that's been mentioned around the league. And what's interesting here is that there are actually a few different options that they can choose from. And I think look no further than the Bay Area. Max Crosby has been known to already be disgruntled. He's wanted to stay with the Raiders, but the fact is they're going nowhere quick. They are not committed to excellence. And Max Crosby in his camp has already kind of voiced some concerns about the future of the franchise. Then you have also Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, a generational talent who's voiced concerns about wanting to be in the meetings with ownership about the future. He doesn't want to be part of another rebuild. He is in the prime of his career and doesn't want to be part of a long-term rebuild when you don't know who the quarterback is. You don't know what the plans are for the offensive line. You don't know what the plans are for the defensive line. You don't know what the plans are for the head coach. And so if you put yourself in the position of Myles Garrett and Max Crosby, both are in their prime. Both are generational talents. Both have rated number 1 in their pass rush effectiveness. Both have led the league when it comes to double teams and triple teams and still create constant pressure. The reality is the 49ers need to check both places this offseason. They've both shared concerns about the future. Both of them want to be on a contenders team. Both of them don't want to be the primary focus of opposing offenses. That's right, offenses, because typically an offense will game plan against your best defender. We're going to avoid that area. But if an offense has to account for both Nick Bosa and for Max Crosby and Myles Garrett, that's going to drive defenses nuts. I want you to think back to the Patriots. Patriots were 16-0 in the regular season, made it all the way to the Super Bowl, and who did they play? They played the New York Giants, and the Giants that made it as a wild card, the Giants that beat them because of their defensive line. You had Michael Strahan, you had O.C. Umenyiora, you had Justin Tuck. All of them wreaked havoc, and that's what changed the game. It was the trenches, the trenches, the trenches. So when you think about the defense, it starts at the defensive line, and Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, those are the game changers that you need opposite of Nick Bosa. Again, the 49ers have tried to revive careers. They brought Leonard Floyd. He's up there in age. He's got another year. And they've tried bringing Chase Young, and they haven't found that piece that fits well across the opposite side of Nick Bosa. And I want to just bring up a few of their pass rushing grades. Let's talk about Max Crosby this year in 2024. He's ranked 23rd against the run. What's one of the 49ers' biggest Achilles heels this year? Against the run, right? They haven't been able to stop the run. When Drake Greenlaw was in, it seemed like he helped kind of hide some of those sins, but really the interior of that defensive line, but also the outside edge, setting that edge, it's been difficult for the 49ers. Max Crosby ranks 23rd out of 206 defensive ends. He's only 27 years old. When you go against the pass, he ranks 37th out of 206 defensive ends. That's up there. And again, mind you, that's according to pressures, that's as far as getting home, and that's still while being doubled and triple teamed. Now let's jump over to Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, his pass rush grade is number 2. That's right, 2 out of 206. He's ranked 15th against the run out of 206. That's up there on both areas. Typically, when you see pass rushers, they specialize on pass rushing, and they don't do that great against the run. Similar to tight ends, you think of Travis Kelce, great catcher, is not a great run blocker. George Kittle is a unicorn of his own because he's a great pass catcher, great after the run, and can block well. When it comes to defensive ends, it's the same story. It's, can you rush the passer well, or are you just good against the run? Nick Bosa is one of those unicorns because he does both very well. But the opposite side, the 49ers have not found something that works well. So the question has to be asked, will either Myles Garrett or Max Crosby be a good alternative on the opposite side? Yes, would the 49ers need to go on? Yes, but they've done it already for a quarterback that didn't pan out. Now to go after somebody that could potentially revolutionize and just change that defense overnight. Because everybody gets better. You're talking about your corners that are already playing very well, most of which are coming back. You re-signed Deommodore Lenoir. Renardo Green's been playing well. Charvarius Ward will probably go walk in free agency, so you might have to address that there. But you're probably going to re-sign Talanoa Hufanga. You have Malik Mustafa, who's a very promising rookie. Jair Brown, who's hit a sophomore slump, but the back end isn't the weak spot anymore. It's the defensive line. And you tried addressing that with a few different picks. You traded a 7th round pick to get Malik Collins from the Texans. You have Jordan Elliott. You have Evan Anderson, who Evan Anderson is now going to be a free agent. So you need to address the interior as well, which we'll get to that in a bit. But let's talk about the opposite side of Nick Bosa. Myles Garrett and Max Crosby, either one of them would be a game changer for this defensive line. You would be looking at yourselves as the modern day Giants when, again, you had Michael Strahan, O.C. Umenyiora, and Justin Tuck. That defensive line wreaked havoc against the Patriots, and that's why the Giants won. It wasn't just because of Eli Manning's heroics. It's because the Patriots couldn't do what they normally do because they didn't have the time. They didn't have the time to do that, and that's what you need on the defensive line for the 49ers. You need somebody opposite of Nick Bosa. And if it were up to me, I would choose Myles Garrett. Yes, he's a year older than Max Crosby. Myles Garrett's 28 years old. Max Crosby's 27. But when you combine both the run and the pass rush, Myles Garrett I don't see anybody else like him. He blocks the run as well as he pass rushes. Max Crosby is great against the run as well, but Myles Garrett is just a tick above that. And so I think if you have a Myles Garrett and a Nick Bosa, the sky's the limit for the defense. You're talking about a generational type of defense. Is that too crazy to think about? Well, Myles Garrett and Max Crosby's contracts are both manageable. That's what's crazy. A lot of their guaranteed money has been paid to them up front. So if they were to get a trade and approve that, the 49ers could carry that while still paying Brock Purdy. The alternative is to get an extension for them, which is probably what they both want. Get that extension, and then you can push the salary cap. You can push a lot of those bigger hits down the road when the cap should be going up and up. And so what you need to do is figure out, how do we get one of these guys in? Now, I doubt Max Crosby would come over because it's the Raiders and, that Bay Area rivalry. I don't know if Mark Davis would sign off on that, but who knows? 2 first-round picks can do a lot. Maybe you do a couple 2 first-round picks, and then you package in a Deebo Samuel into that package. Maybe you do a couple other things where you can kind of sweeten up that pot. But I think 2 first rounds is probably the starting point when it comes to a Myles Garrett or a Max Crosby. Maybe you're taking on some of that hit because they both have hits. If they're going to get traded, there's going to be some dead cap. Maybe you work something else out when it comes to that. But the 49ers need to do something. And I think what was clear about this year is that the majority of their issues on both sides of the ball stems from the trenches. And if you don't address the trenches are going to come back and get you no matter what. Whether that's at the end of the season as the year goes on, injuries start happening, whether that's in the playoffs and your weaknesses are shown to everybody on prime time. The fact is, if you don't have trenches on the offensive side or defensive side, then you're going to find yourself watching somebody else celebrate another Super Bowl win. And so the 49ers, if you want to change this defense and come back to your roots, that identity, it needs to start at the defensive line. You need to find somebody opposite of Nick Bosa, and that's a Myles Garrett or Max Crosby. The writing's on the wall already. They probably both won't be playing for their current teams. Myles Garrett probably won't be playing for the Browns. He doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. Max Crosby doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. Both teams don't have a good quarterback. So the fact is, something needs to happen, and both are willing to move. Both have wanted to stay there for their entire career, but they've had both voiced concerns because of the direction of the franchise. And the 49ers, yes, a lot has happened that they need to address during the offseason, but also there were a lot of injuries. So we know a lot of their star players are going to come back. And what would somebody like a Myles Garrett or Max Crosby do for that defense? And not just that, I think we also need to consider, what would it look like to bring back DeForest Buckner back home? Talked about, it's all about the defensive line. But that interior could also use an upgrade. And DeForest Buckner turning 30, so which means he's getting up there. What would it be like to bring him back home? One of the reasons the 49ers traded him away for a first-round pick to the Colts is they couldn't come to a contract agreement. DeForest Buckner was asking for 21. He mentioned he was willing to meet in the middle at 18. The 49ers didn't want to pay more than 15. So they paid Eric Armstead 15, shipped DeForest Buckner out, and he's had an all-pro year in and year out. And I think the 49ers have realized, you know what, we're better together. We need to figure this out. So I could potentially see him coming back next year. But the fact is, you need to address that defensive line opposite side of Nick Bosa. And you got to have people that are good and solid against the run. And Max Crosby and Myles Garrett are both that way. Again, my preference is Myles Garrett. Yes, he's a year older than Max Crosby. But if you look at his grade against the run, how well he does at stopping the run, number two rated defensive end against the run out of 206 eligible defensive ends. That doesn't happen overnight. That means, again, typically you see you're either a specialist at rushing the passer or stopping the run. You're a unicorn if you do both well. And that's what Nick Bosa is, and you need that on the opposite side. And I think if you get a Max Crosby or Myles Garrett, that changes the face of this defense. And I think that becomes a championship defense. And it's something you can do. And so I think the 49ers, they need to take a strong look during the offseason. They've shut down a lot of players, which is good. Get them healthy, have a good offseason, and come back next year firing on all cylinders. It's not a rebuild year. It's a reload year. And that happens by signing Max Crosby or Myles Garrett. Well, that's all we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And it's our 1 year. So if you tuned in, thanks for tuning in. It is our 1 year as a YouTube channel, Ninerology. And you can always help support by liking, subscribing, sharing any videos, and we'll catch you next time. But this episode was all about the defense, and 49ers, you can get back to owning and being the kings of the NFC if you address that defensive line. Well, that's all we have. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next.